ever heard their partner say, "I'm sorry, but I was having a really bad day," or "I'm sorry, but you just make me so angry"? These are common phrases people tell their partners after they've been verbally, physically, or emotionally abused by them. Nearly 1 in 3 women have experienced some form of domestic violence, and for most, that cycle of violence never ends. Through my work at a community action agency, I met a young woman who told me she had been trying to escape her abuser for several years, but started to believe she was not able to do that and wasn't going to be able to make it without him. The night she gained enough courage to leave, he found her packing her items in the bathroom, yelled at her for destroying his life, and then slammed her face into the porcelain sink. She suffered traumatic injuries, but with the help of the hospital staff, law enforcement, she was finally able to break free from her abuser. We may hear about victims of domestic violence through social media outlets and think, why doesn't she just leave him? Well, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the cycle of domestic violence is one of the hardest cycles to break away from because of the physical, psychological damage that occurs in an abusive relationship. Victims and their families need to escape the abuser, but they need to do so safely. The cycle of domestic violence is important to learn and understand as abusers use the cycle to maintain power and control over their partners through the 4 phases of tension building: the incident, the reconciliation, and the calm. The initial phase that starts the cycle of domestic violence is tension building. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, when you first meet your partner, you may not know they're abusive, but over time, they can become more and more aggressive and controlling. Brittany Passanen from Indian Head Community Action Agency's Legal Assistance for Victims program says that once the verbal abuse starts, it typically leads to violent outbursts and intensifies over time. Victims begin to learn the warning signs from their abusers when they know tension is building. The victims become fearful but try to please the abuser as to not provoke them or make them angry. Tension builds over common domestic issues like money, kids, or jobs. You may not know your partner is abusive until tension builds from a situation you may or may not have any control over and the abuser lashes out. The second phase that follows the cycle of domestic violence is the incident or the actual act of violence. The tension builds to a breaking point and the abuser explodes and the incident occurs. Abusers will either use verbal, emotional, or physical abuse. Victims say the emotional abuse hurts worse than the physical abuse. Physical abuse happens, then it's over, while emotional abuse continues over and over and over again. According to the national studies, every 15 seconds, a woman is beaten in the U.S. Nearly 4 million women are abused each year, and many of these cases go unreported. As soon as the incident occurs, many victims try to rationalize the situation and begin blaming themselves, realizing and rationalizing the situation, and they wonder, what did I do? How could I let this happen? And what can I do differently so I don't upset him again? The incident or the actual act of violence or abuse that occurs can have different forms such as verbal, emotional, and physical abuse, but the abuser finds a way to apologize for the abuse. The third and most dangerous phase that follows the cycle of domestic violence is the reconciliation or the honeymoon phase. As Brittany Passanen explains, the reconciliation phase is when the abuser recognizes what they did was wrong and apologizes to the victim, telling them they will never do it again. The victim believes the abuser is truly sorry and didn't mean to do it. Because the victim begins to believe they caused the violence, they're more accepting of the apology. The abusers will do anything to win the victim's back. The abuser needs to feel power and control over the victim, and therefore does whatever they can to regain the trust of the victim. The final phase in the cycle of domestic violence is the calming phase. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence mentions the calm as a way for the abuser and the victim to forget the incident. This phase may last a day, a month, or sometimes longer, but it allows the victim to believe the abuser was truly sorry and didn't mean to hurt them. This phase will not last forever. The cycle of domestic violence continues over and over and over again. As soon as tensions build, the cycle starts over. The fear sets in for victims, the emotional, the physical abuse starts to occur again, and the abuser apologizes but blames the victim, and things may be calm for a bit. Then the cycle of domestic violence starts all over again. In conclusion, the cycle of domestic violence is a never-ending, dangerous cycle. Unfortunately, the cycle of domestic violence will start over again. Tensions will build for the abuser will take it out on the victims, the abuser will apologize and promise to never do it again, and the calm will allow both the abuser and the victim to forget the whole thing ever happened. Until the next time. There are more people out there like the young woman whose abuser violently slammed her face into the sink. The more the victims understand the cycle of domestic violence, the sooner they will be able to realize they cannot change the abuser, but instead provide a better life for themselves and their families. The cycle of domestic violence is a never-ending, dangerous cycle.